This lecture 3 is, as this title says here, is an incisive teaching for modern people. And everybody should still remember that 2020, when this lesson was taught, the world is really undergoing a dramatic changes. Coronaviruses, and we got this big nations doing trade wars and all those kind of conflict. And it was really lots of changes for many people. We all know that in Sutra, Buddha's teaching, there is this analogy was very common. It's a house of fire. It looks like year 2020 was more than that. I'll share later even my personal life also. Okay, so then we need to find ourselves a strong mental state. So that's what Khenpo was hoping, and also by this teaching. In particular, this teaching, I think I've listened this live. Waking up early. But this is not as that, maybe because I was just, continuously listening to Khenpo, that I didn't feel as much, or maybe I felt, okay, I already have built up a little bit of strength. So not as much as like Francina, who also helped beautifully translated this text, has felt that much. But now when I read it again, especially when I'm doing the summary today, so then I had to do it even more carefully, I've found these teachings are not only profound, it maybe it's looks simple in terms of language, but the message is really profound. So as Khenpo said, for Dharma practitioners, as indicated in the title, we should know both suffering and happiness can and must be transformed into the path of enlightenment. I think that is the key message of the whole teaching. So it is important to realize that it can be transformed and it must be transformed. So the technique is efficient and universally applicable. Because this teaching is about a century old. But however, as Khenpo said, he has found that these are very applicable to today. It's almost nothing less than when it was first taught. Khenpo has gone through, among those year 2020, those kind of all those turbulences, Khenpo went through different teachings. Some are by great masters like Nippon Rinpoche, but among all of these, has chosen this one, the Tenpe Nyima's transforming suffering and happiness into enlightenment, has chosen this to teach at that time. And I'll just read this highlighted one. All these instructions, I find Tenpe Nyima's transforming suffering and happiness into enlightenment notably invigorating and salient for modern people, as he precisely and deeply revealed the underlying causes that contribute to the mentality of suffering in general, but which is also relevant to the mindset of people being challenged by this most recent pandemic. Okay, 3 types of reactions when distressed. Okay, he mentioned a book that called Fragile. things that gain from disorder. I believe this is an American author. Again, you have to admire how knowledgeable and how much readings, books Khenpo has read. From books, philosophy, of course, Tantra's Buddhism, but the worldly authors and their works, as well as news. Especially when I met Khenpo in person, each time when there's a news, sometimes I have heard it, but Khenpo already also. Sometimes I have not, but Khenpo already also. I was just wondering how his bandwidth is to be able to cover so many of these things. So one time we sat down, he mentioned a book of Adam Smith, right? We all know the Wealth of a Nation, of course, but then there is the other one, right? I forgot the English title. It's like on moral or something like that. That's one time before a lecture of his where I was driving him. I was just so amazed, right? I've never heard of that book from that author. Anyways, let me continue. Three types. There are those who brought to their knees, but there are also those who remain steady with confidence that things will get better. And of course, the third is what we all like to be and Khenpo hope was all to be, is a smaller in number, but not only remain strong throughout the challenge, but view these times and difficulty as opportunities to improve and empower themselves. I think is it in the Way of Bodhisattva, there is the example of the bird, peacock. The peacock eat poison stuff. They have to eat the poison stuff in order to make their leather more, what's the word, beautiful. So I think that's fit this type of situation, the third type. The example like Milarepa give us or taught us that hardship is a good thing, is a necessary ingredient in our practice, right? Because without that, he could not have attained that enlightenment in that simple lifetime. There are many other examples of this adversities. Khenpo used this, one of the 84 Mahasiddhas from India. This is a nun or monk, right? Had that leprosy, which is really kind of deadly, both in terms of the body and the mind. But he took good use of that and achieved great achievements. Okay, so here Khenpo showed the logic. The logic's reasoning presented should answer that question in a manner that is easy to comprehend. That the language and the concept utilized here are not as sophisticated as pramana, nor as profound as the Vajra teachings. But with a plain language, this teaching offers an easy to understand guide to the secrets of mind. This is talking about Tenpe Nyima's, the whole teaching. Next one is dropping and cultivating. So two steps of transforming suffering. The first one is dropping the attitude of being completely unwillingness to suffer. And the second one is cultivating the attitude of being joyful when suffering arises. So basically, this passage is telling us no matter how much we try to avoid, because of the force of the karma, these sufferings is unavoidable. Right? This is not a not a pessimistic attitude, but more it is a just see the fact, right? Accept the fact and kind of acceptance. Yes, as it said, as Khenpo said here, due to the intensive negative karma that has been gathered in our countless past lives, it is unrealistic to expect that we will never experience a single instant of suffering. I think I should be quicker. It's already 12:20 here. Okay, here I highlighted studying it once is not enough. It is an imperative key we should review continuously. Let me talk about this a little bit. I think, again, the study of Buddhism, or maybe we'd rather say practice, is quite different than either things we learn in a work, in family life, or in the society, or in the education system, right? Because most of the times the education system, there almost no exception, is more information or maybe data, right? Whatever we learn, when we know it, then we know it, then that's it. However, Buddhism is not just to know the message, but is more to internalize and then like transform ourselves. That is really the difference, right? There are really some good things, good messages that we started to hear or we learned even during our childhood, right? If we don't talk about previous lives, but we know it, but we really have not really followed that in our life. We already forgot it. The reason because we don't do the practice, or last time we mentioned in Tibetan, the practice or meditation more means internalize, familiarize, or habitualize, right? It has to become part of your self, let's say, right? Part of your brain, part of your thought, part of your instinct, which means part of yourself. I think this is quite different, as many of us has realized. Okay, dropping attitude of being entirely unwilling to suffer. I'll read the root text. Negative emotions are useless. Dropping the attitude of being entirely unwilling to suffer. Think about all the depression, anxiety, and irritation we put ourselves through by always seeing suffering as unfavorable, something to be avoided at all costs. Now think about two things: how useless this is and how much trouble it causes. Go on reflecting on this repeatedly until you are absolutely convinced. Okay, I highlighted this quote from Way of Bodhisattva. Just allow me to read it. Indeed, a calm mentality. This is derived from the reflection on suffering and impermanence. Can help a lot, and at least won't intensify the illness, as is stated in the Way of the Bodhisattva. So come what way, and I'll never harm. My cheerful happiness of mind, depression never brings me what I want. My virtue will be warped and marred by it, right? So just avoid in this way, right? It's different than a fear, but clearly realize it doesn't really help. So even here, there's a medical example Khenpo was using here. The stress hormone, cortisol, can suppress the effectiveness of the immune system. It's even bad for the body. Therefore, an important aspect of our practice must be uphold a stable and balanced state of mind. Again, because of repeated reflection on this point will progressively give rise to a type of certainty This certainly does not arise as a result of superficial talk or outside influence, but is rather a firm belief that arises as a result of deep inner reflection. Again, as we said, right? Reflection, habituation, internalization, all these mean the same thing. We know this message is right, keep think about it. Internalize the teaching with great courage and determination. Then say to yourself, from now on, whatever I have to suffer, I will never become anxious or irritated. Go over this again and again in your mind and summon all your courage and determination. I think because of time, maybe let's just skip a little bit. This is pretty straightforward, right? We need a courage. Courage not only, almost like summon all of our strength, all of our power, just to do it. I think this is a very, again, we have heard lots of good teachings too, even those that not Buddhism, but there's some valuable teachings. But we thought, okay, now we know it, right? We hear people say, wow, I've heard this years ago, right? Or, when I was young, almost as if he or she already is a great master of this message, but actually he's not. Again, very importantly, summon all your strength and courage, and then practice. Okay, I'll skip this because this is part of the questions that Fong put there. We can make change the messages. Yeah, here Khenpo used the analogy of dust in the palm and dust in the eye to compare ordinary beings and the noble beings. Again, noble beings look at these suffering very seriously, not because of fear, but they know this is the starting point. That to figure out the truth of the world, of the whole phenomena, if you will. Okay, so as is said here, they're strongly determined to rid themselves of it by undoing the root cause, right? The root cause is important. Therefore, we can see the Buddha Dharma has the incredible power to transmute an individual and completely rid them of their habitual tendency and their temperament. I think we have some examples here. Yeah, Khenpo was using his cousin as an example. Even that person almost look not changeable, but after study Buddha Dharma for a few years, he has made almost a different person. That showed the power of the Buddhism teachings. Okay, next one is be aware of extremely harmful emotions. So examples are diversity of investment. So, right, we always say we don't put all the eggs in one basket. This is because if we're too much attached to something or a person, an individual, when there's a change, you cannot stand. That's why here more other examples of negative emotions to avoid. A quote from again Way of Bodhisattva says here, when the urge arises in the mind, the feeling of desire or wrathful hate, do not act, be silent, do not speak, and like log of wood be sure to stay. I know many of us wanted to be like this, right? But sometimes, many times, it is very hard. This habitual tendency or the karma, right, in between us and the beings. But the good news again, when we started to practice, you could find the progress big or small, is noticeable. So eventually we'll be like this, because when we realize how, for example, the empty nature of whatever that is happening, then there's not much of this hatred um, or attachment or greedy, right? Okay, let's move on. And then pay attention and then cultivate noble qualities. Here there is an example of a bhikkhu that when facing these negative things, unlike ordinary beings that respond with angry, with hate, he sees the positive side, right? Because of the slander of the other bhikkhu, he was able to practice on getting rid of these 8 worldly preoccupations, which is really, really important to everyone. Okay, one more quote, not from Treasure of Good Advice, not to be pleased by praise, nor displeased by criticism, and to properly maintain their good qualities. These are characteristics of noble people. Again, I think we have a question here on the sore spots. I think we use a button, also, right? The word button also in English. Let's discuss this part during the question and answer. 2 positive thoughts to accept suffering. Nothing to be unhappy about. First, let's look at how useless it is. If we can do something to solve a problem, then there is no need to worry or be unhappy about it. If we can't, then it doesn't help to worry or be unhappy about it either, right? I think many of us are familiar with this quote from the Way of Bodhisattva. If there is a remedy when trouble strikes, what reason is there for despondency? And if there is no help for it, what use is there in being sad, right? Basically, if you're really calm and have a clear mind, this is not hard to accept, right? If there is a remedy, then don't worry about it. If there is not, then don't worry about it, right? Because there's no use. Okay, suffering can be changed by your perception. Then enormous trouble involved. As long as we don't get anxious and irritated, then our strength of mind will enable us to bear even the hardest suffering as easily. They will feel as flimsy and insubstantial as a cotton wool. But while we are dominated by anxiety, even the tiniest problem becomes extremely difficult to cope with, because we have the additional burden of mental discomfort and happiness. I believe this is very familiar to everyone, right? And we actually all have this moment. We may even have those realization that it's really our perception that matters, or the perception that matters. Here, I think there's a proverb: when one door closes, another door is open. Maybe in many other languages, you have your own version, where the Chinese has also. We can always find a way out, maybe leading to a more meaningful state, which is, in many cases, if you go this way, it is the result. Khenpo was talking about his example, and interestingly, I'm kind of involved in these examples. He was planning Russia, Dubai, Poland, UK. I was wondering, is this particular because one time, either this time or one time before this, he was preparing first come over to US, starting from Hawaii, where I flew to wait for him because there were no, of course I wanted to see Khenpo, but there was no driver. I like to drive for Khenpo. So I waited in Hawaii, but he didn't show up. I think it was this trip too, because it's US and then from US go to Russia. If not, it could be two trips, as I remember, but there is one that kind of I personally had a little bit of a connection. So Campbell shared this in the class that he was in the hotel waiting for the flight where the team of people or whatever, official people show up, just said, no, you cannot go, right? Imagine that's the moment you're about to fly, you're already in the hotel near to the airport. However, using these time, because he couldn't travel, he translated so many shastras and works. Right? And also he was sick in Xiamen, and when he had chance to translate the biography of Buddha Shakyamuni, I visited Xiamen and Nanpu but the south, and the hospital. And I knew that hospital, it was Khenpo State. And I saw that hospital. I was in the temple, and the monks has pointed to me that room that Khenpo State and did the translation. So I'm quite happy I was able to visit those places. Okay, and not only the body, the sickness, but also I think there are some different things like a slender or, people thing, right? That drove him to like outside of Larangar. And of course, it ended well with the blessing of His Holiness. He went back. And then 2016, another difficult year. Khenpo went to surgery. Again, we all knew that because we met him, I think the next year, a few months later in Thailand. Yeah, he was still, he was, I don't know, in my eyes, he was recovered very well. And his mother, the loss of his mother was quite some, there were quite some story also, because that same day, the government people were having meeting with him, didn't realize that his mother passed away. So that was already very late in the night, maybe midnight, when the officials have heard from other sources, and then was very kind of apologetic to Campbell. Hey, why didn't you just share it with me? That was Khenpo. I think that story alone was very impactful to me, of course, very positively. Yeah, again, he has taught the Chinese Buddhism over that time. Okay, opening another door. Mipun Rinpoche said, seemingly unfavorable circumstances may become favorable and vice versa. So same kind of message. Okay, skip a little bit. One more quote here. When they find a dying serpent, even crows behave like soaring eagles. Therefore, if I'm weak and feeble-hearted, even little faults will strike me down and injure me. So again, same kind of message. Seal the door senses. Okay, I'll just do a summary here. I think is because the three poisons are all, I think, started with our door senses, right? Because greedy is because you see something. If we seal this well, and then that will avoid a lot of these afflictions after. So the basic message is this. And here, sealing the door, see what else here? A person's body as immature and unclean. Yeah, this is about the greedy part. The same principle applies to suffering. Yeah, if you feel that, stop thinking about that, hey, I'm in pain, which is really useless. Not only useless, but get you more down to the what is downward spiral. So if there's any way that we could stop thinking this way, stop the fixating, that would be very helpful. Okay, last couple of passages. To summarize, the aforementioned sections, we must engage in the following two actions in order to transform suffering deeply and repeatedly contemplate in the teaching, to not reject suffering, to exert ourselves in fierce practice with strong courage. I think I'll skip some of them and just read the last passage that Khenpo has said, which I think is very powerful. In regards to the practice and transforming the suffering into beneficial means, I am fairly confident in my ability to apply it and attribute this to my having gone through the in-depth studies and assiduous practice during my early days. If I hadn't done so, I couldn't offer you this teaching with an experiential insight, nor would you embrace the teaching. So be sure that you are pursuing the Buddha Dharma genuinely and not with a careless attitude. Without a doubt, you will benefit from the teaching if you practice earnestly. If you practice genuinely and ardently, I have no doubt that you will experience the potency of its effect, both for yourself and for others. You will also find that once you have gained a personal realization of the Dharma teaching, you can also share the teaching with others and have powerful impact on them. There are many superb Mahayana path instructions in Tibetan Buddhism, but they would be useless if the instructions remain as words alone, rather than accepted and actually applied. So please take the teaching into your heart and let it completely dissolve into your mind through the diligent practice, and the result will amaze you beyond imagination. Hey, that is amazing. Again, when listening to this in Chinese, which is the mother language, the good news is, I think, is easier to understand. Or the bad news is you may have under the impression, hey, this is easy to understand, then you don't pay attention. So when, like for me, when using English and you have to read it more carefully, then I found there's more than I thought. Okay.
Way by reviewing the technique that was taught to the. I'd like to speak on the subject of Tonglen. I'd like to begin right away by reviewing the technique that was taught to the students of Trungpa Rinpoche, that he taught to his students. And this is the form of Tonglen that I have always taught, and that is taught here at Khenpo Abbey. And I make this preface because there's actually, even though the essence of Tonglen is always the same, there's many different ways of teaching it, slightly different versions, some of which I'm going to present. So the technique is said to have 4 stages. And sometimes it's thought of as 3 stages, with the third part having like 2 parts, just to make it more Buddhist. And the third part of the fourth part has 6 parts. No, not really, I'm just kidding. So the first is taught as just touching in with stillness or openness of mind. Just touching in. And the way Trungpa Rinpoche used to express that is just a flash of absolute bodhicitta. Now, often when that is taught and that instruction is given, people really don't have a sense of at all of what that might mean. So Rinpoche suggested that when we're doing formal meditation, that we listen to the gong as a way of just looking straight ahead, just listen to the gong at the beginning of the Tonglen as a way of just resting your mind, some kind of openness and stillness. So if you would all just sit up and look straight ahead and just listen to the sound of the gong as if this were the beginning of your Tonglen practice. You've been meditating. Maybe there's already some openness. Maybe the gong shocks you into some openness out of your fantasy world. But in any case, seize that sort of moment and look straight out and listen to the sound of the gong almost until it's gone.
Why did dogs live longer in the 1970s?
Back in the 1970s, a golden retriever's average life.
Next time, download it.
And when it begins to die out, then begin breathing in the quality or texture of claustrophobia, usually described as dark, thick, and heavy. Sometimes also say hot. Breathing it in. Breathing out the texture or quality of spaciousness. Clear, light, fresh. So one breathes in, claustrophobia in this form of a visualization. And one can breathe that into your whole body, taking it into your whole body, or one can breathe it into the heart, sense of this more concentrated, claustrophobic, dark, hot, heavy, thick, breathing it into the heart or the whole body, either way. But in either case, when you breathe in, there's a sense of opening. Sometimes the image is used of the heart widening, getting very, very large so that you could take in any amount of claustrophobia because you just expand as much as you can. So in a way, it's an exercise of opening the heart to what we usually want to push away. So visualizing the dark, heavy, hot coming in, visualizing clear, white, cool, refreshing going out. It's a very thorough sending out, like sending it out from all the pores of your body, radiating it out. And during this stage, your eyes can be open or closed. The Lojong slogan is to practice taking and sending on the medium of the breath. So that's to say you synchronize this with your breath. Your breath coming in brings in the heavy, hot claustrophobia. Breath going out radiates out, clear, light, bright, refreshing. And you just do this for a while, breathing in and out until it feels synchronized with the breath, doing this visualization. Also, the breath can be manipulated. You can breathe in very deeply and send out very fully, but always give the in-breath and the out-breath equal time. That's important. So you do that for a while. There's no designated time, but until it feels synchronized. And then you move on to what is considered the main part of the practice. And here you use a specific object. The other day I suggested that people do Tonglen for their mother. So it would go like this: breathing in you take away from your mother anything that you feel, and your mother can have already died, that's all right. It doesn't really matter. Just to have a visualization or hold the face or the name of your mother, taking away from her, breathing in from her anything that you feel used to cause her distress or currently causes her distress, and sending out relief in whatever form you wish. Which is to say, sometimes people say the word compassion or the word strength or the word happiness or something like this, contentment, and it means something to them. It's not just abstract. That word has emotional meaning. But other times that people find words too abstract, and so instead they will send something that they feel their mother that would make their mother happy, such as beautiful flowers or a lovely day or anything really. But the idea is to send something that would produce well-being and let your mother be happy and relaxed and free of suffering. So the in-breath really is the compassion breath. You're wishing your mother to be free of suffering. The out-breath is the loving-kindness breath. You're wishing her to be happy and at ease. So in this main part of Tonglen, no matter who you're doing it for, it's you always try to have it be as real and personal as possible. Now, I chose mother because in our culture, mother is often very loaded. And so I knew in a room this size, there might actually be very few who could really do it for their mother easily and with a good heart and goodwill. And there would be a larger number in a group in the West who would feel much more complicated, anything from confused and kind of ambiguous feelings to actual dislike, which even that could be maybe too gentle a word. So knowing that, I said, if in doing the practice for your mother you find it blocked in some way by your genuine emotions, don't feel that you have failed. Instead, just shift the focus of the Tonglen and begin to do Tonglen with your feelings. So in other words, suppose you're feeling fear or anger, irritation, resentment, anything like this. Breathe in that feeling. Breathe it in completely. I personally like the idea of breathing it into the heart. That's how I usually do it, and making the heart very large. But you can also just breathe it into your whole being. That feeling, breathe it in and then send out relief, whatever you feel is needed. But then we come to the important next stage, which is considered the expansion stage. And this is either considered as a fourth stage, or I actually like to think of it as part of the third stage. It's almost simultaneous as doing it for yourself or doing it for your mother, and that is you expand. So for instance, if you breathe in the troubled feelings that you're having and send out relief, then you start breathing in for all the people who are in this kind of conflicted relationship with their parents or loved ones, and sending out relief to all of them, so that your very personal experience that you're having right on the spot, which you might feel ashamed of, these feelings, but instead of them being an obstacle, they actually become the basis of maitri for yourself and compassion for other people in the same boat. Likewise, if you're just simply doing it for your mother and it's a genuine, open heart, you can feel the heart opening and you find it easy to do and actually rewarding to do, then as quite quickly you also do it for all the other mothers or all the other people that are in your mother's situation, maybe that are very ill, so as your mother is, or very, very depressed as your mother is, or very maybe holding some kind of a grudge. We'll do it for all the other Jewish mothers.
Okay, actually, I found both the two that Fong has shared and this Pema Chödron one was more instructions than didn't really leave much time for a self to meditate. This is Tonglen to some extent is not that hard. Think of someone maybe starting with not the hard ones, right? Like your enemy, but the ones you like, and then exchange breathing out all these white vapor or light containing all the good luck, best wishes, and fortune, all the good things, and let the object that you choose receive that. And then from him or her or it, and then emitting all this black color vapor or light, containing all the bad luck, adversities, sickness, all these bad things coming to you, into you through your breathing in, through the inhale. And to Pema Chödron, maybe can into deeply in the heart. Basically, it's like that, and then starting with an easy one, and then maybe multiple, and then the harder one, neutral people, and then your enemy, doing all these. And sometimes it's severe. For example, somebody was sent to ICU, or it got a really terminal disease, and then you want to exchange these. Is also a process doing Tonglen. Depending how much strength that you have, you'll be able to do try this. I guess we don't really have to follow kind of the guided. Yeah, I think that was my kind of experience. Maybe one or two can share this short meditation.
I find this sort of meditation quite effective simply because you're doing it for all sentient beings. I like that she used mother as an example. Yeah. I personally am always trying to share some of my enlightenment and my attitude towards suffering and attitude towards the past with my mother, but she is so ingrained in her act of suffering that she's not able to internalize that. But I'm continuing. So this is another method rather than trying to instill those values on a face-to-face basis with my mother. I can do this from anywhere, from my own room, through the method that Pema Chödron is showing us. So
yeah, very good point. Actually, some of the teachings, I think, because it's Tibetan culture, using the all sentient beings as an object is much easier maybe than other cultures. But in some of the other cultures, having a specific object, sometimes it's harder, right? Because you generate bodhicitta toward your enemy is harder than all sentient beings, namely. Yeah, good point. All right, let's see who else like to share.
Yeah, I think Pema Chödron mentioned that there are obviously different ways of practicing Tonglen. This is one way, and then this idea of the mother is very interesting. But very often, as she mentions, we have complex relationships with our mothers. And what I've heard often for Tonglen is to, instead of thinking systematically of the mother, is thinking of a person that exemplifies greatness, kindness, a person we have been close to, who has helped us, So for anyone, it can be anybody. It doesn't have to be the mother. So I think that's sometimes that can be helpful, not to think of the mother for some people. But obviously, if the mother works, go for it. So that's one thing. And then another thing that I found very interesting with this practice is also to use it when we are experiencing suffering. So this is something that, for instance, I sometimes have very acute back pain, I've been lucky this year, I didn't, but in the past, sometimes I could spend like 2 or 3 days in bed because my back hurts a lot. And then I found doing Tonglen in this moment to be very useful. And then, for instance, in inhaling all the back pain of everybody in the world, and then receiving it at this moment, and then blowing out all the cure to back pains, for example. That can be a very powerful form of practicing Tonglen. That can be very very special.
Okay, question 1. Why do we need to drop the attitude of being completely unwilling to suffer? Is a question. Why question?
I'll use my own words. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, for example, if I'm nervous or something, I tell myself, okay, don't nervous, don't nervous, don't nervous, and it become more nervous. So, but no, more anxious. So, but when I tell myself, okay, so what's big deal about the anxious? Everyone anxious. Okay, so at sometimes I use the Jonathan method. Okay, I'm anxious. I'm just like the black smoke from other people who anxious. I embrace myself, and I give them the happiness, the pure, the calm, peace, and immediately I feel. I somehow, I don't know why why it's like this. I feel good. Maybe it's because your ego, you're limited to yourself. You think yourself, you identify yourself. This is body, this is your body, and you are really anxious, and you focusing on that anxious make you more anxious. But if you try to neutralize it, because emotion is very legit. It's as long as we have a body, mind, we're gonna have some emotions, but you cannot identify that emotion is your true self, because in reality, we are all connected in some way, one way or the other. It's because it's the, like Shantideva told us, or all the our teacher told us. So there's no single solid me, myself, and I. So from this point, I will see, okay, it's like using this emotion as a bridge to connect with other people, with other phenomena, and you kind of open up. And why I'm telling this, because sometimes my thought is jumping all over the place. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
But have to bear with me. But I'm just saying the emotion is kind of a bridge for me to understand, okay, I'm not alone. Other people suffer the same thing as me. And also there's no solid I. And just the moment I practice in Tolan or something, and I'm not focusing on this emotion anymore. I'm not focusing on this body anymore. And my mind is open. And then I somehow the anxious is gone on that moment. And then I realize sometimes, I start thinking myself again. That emotion sometimes come back again. And then, there's no solid me in my eye. And then I just look around. Okay, I'm deeply grateful. The air is free for me. I go to the park, the trees there, the flower there is all free for me. And I have a deeper gratefulness for these things. And this make me open. And when once it's open, you don't identify yourself with your emotions, and you automatically you don't feel too much of yourself, and those emotions is gone. It's like that. I can truly feel that, and I can truly feel like after the practice, with the Sodargye Rinpoche's Chinese group, I saw the changes. I become more grateful of almost everything around me, especially my teacher, my guru, the teaching and the sangha, and also the manifestation from our Buddha nature. Everything, the food I buy from a grocery, I feel the deeper gratefulness, because when I see that, even I give money, but would I would I live alone, like say in an island? Even I have money, I don't get the food, right? We are all connected by one way or the other, and there's no solid self. This really, really helped me, and this is really making me feel, the reality is like this. I don't need to grasp, because the grasping is distorted. It's not true, and it's temporary. But interdependence, everyone connected, that's the truth. For me, I feel right internally. I feel in lineness is really, instead of against the suffering, and you are reinforcing your suffering. That's, I feel. What I'm more talking about
Okay.
my
Okay,
personal feeling.
excellent. That's excellent. We could feel the benefit and the joy that you have from the study and practice. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I like a lot of her points. I think they're really beautiful. And true, is kind of connecting with other people helps. I think it's maybe also just like even you don't want to suffer. We're brought here by karma, so some things can be avoided, but maybe some things cannot. So I think attaching to not suffering is a kind of suffering in itself almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you really want this control over something you can't control, and it isn't possible always. So yeah. And the last person who talked, yeah, her points are really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, but
Okay, cool. Yeah, was exactly what Campbell was telling us. It's just useless, right? If you want to get rid of the suffer completely, suffer, don't let me see you anymore. That's not possible. We know this the sixth patriarch of the Chan Buddhism, Huineng. And I was quite surprised when I heard this, because we all know that he some of his teachings was very familiar to many, but that one he said Huineng doesn't really has the skill of getting rid of all thoughts. I said, wow, really? He has this. Even for him, all the thoughts of here, but again, it's the perception, it's the attitude. Nobody could stop the thoughts, right? We're beings, and the thoughts is really how you see it. That depends if you are a noble one or a ordinary being. Okay, thank you both. Let's jump to the second one. Root text, think about all the depression, anxiety, irritation. We put it together by way of seeing suffering as unfavorable, something to be avoided at all costs. It's still the same things, still saying the same thing. Now think about two things. how useless this is and how much trouble it causes. Go on reflecting on this repeatedly until you are absolutely convinced. What is your reflection on this? Let's see who wanted to share anything.
So basically, my reflection on this text is think about our Buddhism. The essence of Buddhism is everything is impermanent. So all the depression, anxiety, irritation, all the negative feelings or emotions, they are not permanent. They are not there. They are not going to stay with you forever. All the suffering will pass. It is impermanent. And only when you think it is permanent, then it bothers us. And also in Buddhism, we talked about transformation. So basically, how do you transform your thinking and to treat those depression, anxiety, or irritation? They are negative feelings or emotions. How can we transform these emotions into positive thinking? Like thinking right now, I am feeling anxious or depressed, but why? Maybe this is an opportunity for me to train myself to get better dealing with the stress, dealing with the anxiety. So through this way of rephrasing your feeling or transform your feeling into a positive feeling, that way we kind of stop the so-called suffering. And the other thinking I had upon the root text is also, so sometimes we have to think about whether we can, there are things we can control or we can change, but there are bigger pictures and a lot of things are not within our control. Like this morning, there was an earthquake. So, we need the wisdom to know the difference. That's also the serenity prayer we used to, I used to know. It's like, please grant me the serenity to change, to make changes that for things that I can change, and the serenity to not change for things that I cannot change, and also to please grant me the wisdom to know the difference. What are the things that I can change? What are the things I cannot change?
It's interesting, about 2 minutes before you mentioned the serenity prayer, I wrote it in front of me. And,
we have telepathy.
Exactly. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I mean, that's huge. The strength to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. The biggest one, of course, being the strength to change the things that I can. Well, you need to know the difference between what you can change and what you can't. That's huge. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Hey, perfect. Thank you both. Okay, maybe let's just keep moving to the other questions. I think a lot of this there are things in common. Actually, this whole lecture 3 is just telling us and all these worrying about suffering is useless, and then have that strength and do the practice, right? Repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay, so the question 3 is, when confronted by any suffering, such as triggered by relationship, physical illness, lack of freedom, becoming victim of slander or defamation, shortage of food and living necessities, mental afflictions, can we maintain our determination not to become the weak and defeated? To do so requires 2 things in our daily practice, according to Khenpo. Page 68. What is your practice, or what is your, maybe what your thought also?
According to our text, we need two things. First, remove in the mind of unwillingness to suffer. Second, generating joy in face of suffering. And for me, in the past, I was very not very happy to the pain and afraid of it coming. It would take sometime. It will take a long time to get over the big pain, and a small pain also make me unhappy for a while. And then after learning the teaching of from Khenpo, I realized that the less I wanted to feel pain, the more I could not avoid it. If I feel, I will get more pain. I remember some words from adult. When I was young, the adult always tell some boys, and I'm in the children. The adult always told children that if a dog was staring at you, then if there are no adult around, then you should never turn around and run. If you turn around and run, the result is that the dog will catch you and bite you. It will sure. So if you're smart, if you experience, you should, for example, you take some stone or small things, you throw it around the dog, not throw to the dog. You just throw a little far away. Then the dog will chasing that stone or something. Anyway, will release you. But if you go back and run, then the result is it will catch you and bite you. So it's the same reason. So we face the suffering. So if we know the consequence of avoiding it, we must face it calmly. So this is very important. And of course, we should practice. We need to practice until we think the suffering is like a friend. So when it comes, we will not very feel suffer so much. So that's it.
Excellent. Yeah, the dog example, I know dog and the lion example are used very often in Khenpo's teachings and cross Tibetan teachings, and the dog will chase something, just chase the whatever, it's not the person, right? Just chase the stone. But the lion just exactly go to the root cause. So different thing, but yeah, great example. Also, yeah, I also agree, because when we face something, some challenges, if you just turn around, actually in your mind, you never forget, right? In your mind, it becomes bigger, becomes more difficult. But confront is really the right attitude. Because when you confront, and then you will find, okay, it's not snake, it's just a piece of rope, kind of thing. Okay, excellent. Let's maybe one more. Let's one more person to share.
Yeah, I thought about it a lot. I think, personally speaking, I used to suffer from depression, and it was from trying to avoid suffering. I do think kind of, thanks to Buddhism, was able to learn how to kind of accept what is happening and move through it. And but that's a really beautiful thing. So I feel very, very, very grateful for this class and the teachings.
Well, thank you for mentioning this depression thing. And
Yeah.
we had a couple of in our Chinese sessions. There are two, I should say, very serious depression issue. But again, for myself, when I saw them in the class already, then I kind of felt great relief because I know this will work. It may take, every individual may take different time to have it work more, thoroughly, but I'm sure it will work. The moment that you step, onto this kind of teachings, it will, yeah, you're on the right path.
Yeah, I feel really grateful. I realized recently that I don't really, if I go into old ways of thinking and think like, I think like Khenpo said, like, why me, why this, kind of that way of thinking. But actually sitting in meditation and in Buddhism, I don't feel in that depression anymore. So I just feel incredibly grateful for the
Yeah.
Buddhism and for learning how to kind of face and accept karma and suffering. So yeah.
Yeah, great.
Really wonderful.
Actually, just from kind of psychology or medical point of view, that downward spiral, as long as you stop anywhere, right? Anywhere you stop is good. So even, not thinking much and just meditation, keep that kind of shamatha state as much as you can will help. Not to mention these powerful messages that can help us get more strength. And then even not to mention that the unseen blessing that one day we will realize if you don't today. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really rejoice in her merits because everyone's suffering in this world, but not everyone turn to Buddhism. And you turn to Buddhism with your suffering, so your suffering is merit in disguise. I really feel so if you agree with me. So really, really, really good. Lots of merits to meet this great teaching and study this great text, and also many masters, of course. So rejoice in this way.
Thank you.
When I see someone has active depression and you join this class, and okay, great. Then I know things are going to be good for my family members too, right? Some are not because of depression, but they have different kind of sufferings or afflictions. As long as someone walk into this teaching, not even specifically this lineage, right? And any real like genuine Buddhism is like, great, this is great. Then I'm done. I don't have to worry about them anymore. Okay, we'll see. Let's see what's question for. What's your normal reaction to negative comments? I'd say my reaction is not good. Reaction to praises, and you don't have to share. Okay. So regarding the comments of negative or praise or criticism, when we well, this is one of my weak part too, and then depending from who, right? And let's see if anyone wants to share.
I'm not sure if I I'm doing the right thing, but this is really have been bothering me for a long time. So, okay, this is quite profound. First of all, I think positive, negative comments help me to grow. That's always the attitude I take, right? So it's a bitter pill, but you find something that can improve yourself, right? But then there is another type of negative comments. It's like out of misunderstanding about what's going on, right? For example, like maybe about relationship, it's more about karma from past life and also this life, not just some one episode of interaction that led to some like very undesirable outcome. But then if I got blamed just for that one particular time you did this one particular thing, I know that's really mistake, but then you keep getting that kind of comment. Sometimes I don't know how to convey the understanding. Sometimes I would say it's hard because you don't have the common ground to have this kind of conversation to address these negative comments. So most of the time I would keep quiet because I felt like if I talk back when my comments will not be understood or even lead to further misunderstanding, then I would just not say anything, wait for the right timing. But I think the attitude should always be work on myself. That's kind of like work on myself more. And also don't take all the negative comments for its literal meaning, because sometimes people make this kind of comments come from very different backgrounds. And, it's also very hard to change people drastically or in a very short period of time. So if that's the case, I will not try to not be bothered. So not overreacting, but still stay reflective. I don't know if it makes sense. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. And also congratulations, you can remain that state. It's
I'm
I
working on
know
it.
it,
I'm working on it.
yeah, just like the last question, relationship, that connects to karma, because for different person you may have different, even the same words, you may have a different feel or response. I think that's where the word button also comes from, right? And then I remember
and for a long time I've been blaming myself for leading to the misunderstanding, but now I kind of felt like if I believe it's karma, then I should at least accept, this is happening, and don't like overly criticize myself for something I cannot change yet.
Yeah. So yeah, the different moments also, because sometimes you caught unguarded, right? Totally off guard. Then that's even harder, right? Because you're busy, you're still you're already at the emotion, then the person that you dislike most came to you and just said something that you don't like, right? Imagine that moment. I think Dzongsa Rinpoche was asked one question, in relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, or in couples, keep nagging or whatever. His solution was, okay, just watch the lips. Just watch the lips and nothing else. Don't even hear what he or she was talking. Just see the lips moving. And I think that's a great solution, but in many times, even that need to practice repeatedly also. It doesn't work at the first one or the first time or the second. But anyways, yes, the button sometimes maybe is one of the hardest things. And I think again, that's the Chinese culture again. If somebody don't cry at all, is because he was not touched yet, right? So it has to be that karma also. But the practice will keep us more clear on where what the button is, why the button happened, help us to remove the button. I know you may all want to share. Let's just open to one more. Still on this button thing. Anything to share?
I have something to share from my parenting training from a while back when my kids were younger. There's a PET training. It's a parent effectiveness training. So in that training, the first step when you are in a situation, identify who is in the problem zone, who owns the problem. So that helped a lot. So basically you need to really listen to see and reflect on, is this my problem or is it my kids who are having emotional problems? So sometimes, most of the time, I found it is actually my problem. As a parent, I have a lot of emotional baggage from the past and everything. And the kids are actually all right. They are not in the problem zone most of the time. So
Yeah.
that's something I wanted to share.
Yeah, it's a great point. I was in one of the PET class. Actually I was kind of co-teaching because mindfulness and PET half and half. So
Oh,
it was interesting. I think this is pretty common. Some of those, it was a lady that time, when she heard the teachings and the messages, she immediately said to the teacher, "Hey, teacher, can you stop? Let me call my husband. He need to listen to this." Because yeah, it's important to be cool enough to see where the problem or who the problem is. Of
right.
course, in Buddhism, the problem is always me, right? It's not like when His Holiness was asked, what is the cause, of the, world is not at peace? He said, me. I think that's a pun, right? It's me, the self. Okay, maybe spend a little bit on the last one. I didn't really have time to find these 7 approaches. How do we transfer suffering? If anyone has this answer, please come up and share. 7 approaches. I just found that I wasn't able to find it because of time.
Maybe it's a question like in lesson 4 and 5, there's some 7 approaches.
That's the next one then, right? It's not 3.
Yeah. I found in lesson 4 and 5 there are 7 approaches.
Okay.
Transfer to anyway 7 approach.
Okay.
Maybe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Back to sharing. Maybe back to whatever today's question. Jonathan, you may already have something.
Yeah, maybe. I like very much the question about practice because I think it's very relevant. I like to talk about practice in general. I think it's really important, and I was what speaking about myself, like things that I really appreciate. Yeah, just things that make a lot of sense for me about this idea of suffering. And then it would be interesting maybe to see how people relate or see different things. And obviously, I'm not going to list all the elements of practice, but things that I feel personally, to me, make a lot of sense. Is regularly think of the four common preliminaries or the four common thoughts, like talking about precious human life, impermanence, karma, and samsara. Thinking about that over and over again is something that is very much connected with what we talk about here. Practicing the four immeasurables, like thinking about love, compassion, rejoicing, and equanimity. Practicing shamatha, like to stabilize the mind. Khenpo mentioned something that I find so interesting. He says, like, practicing when you're feeling well, like when you're feeling happy and cheerful, because I think that sometimes we forget or we tend to be more negligent of practice when things go well, and then suddenly things go bad, and now I'm thinking, oh, I should practice, but maybe it's a bit too late. Unless you can, for instance, use Tonglen and all these things, but sometimes we go through like intense suffering, and it's not the time to do it at that moment because maybe the pain is too hard. So when we're well, when we're happy, when we're healthy, it's such a great time to practice and do it diligently. And then I feel like it eventually helps when we suffer, because if I've been practicing, basically I've been training my mind for so many weeks or months, then when something happens, it softens the blow, basically. Observing the mind constantly. I think this is also something that Khenpo mentions. Like if you observe your mind, well, first of all, you see the problems. You might see where the thoughts come or where they don't come, where they don't abide, and where they don't go. For instance, these three very important meditations about thoughts. And also it helps feeling more compassionate about oneself, and also especially about others, because if I think and I imagine and I see what's going on in my mind, then I can see how I can connect better with other people, because I know that they go through the same kinds of processes. And something other that I find very important is practicing, learning Lojong teachings, and then learning by heart, and learning verses by heart, and then repeating them, like the 8 verses of training the mind that you have been working on that I missed in the past months. But I say them every week, every day. These 8 verses, I repeat them every morning when I wake up. I repeat them, and then it gets very interesting, because sometimes something happens during the day, and boop, oh, now I'm thinking of verse number 4, or boop, I'm thinking of verse number 2. You know, that's quite interesting. And also Khenpo in this teaching talks about the 7-point mind training by Chikowa, which is another kind of similar teaching as the 8 verses, but more developed. Because they go through more elements of the 8 verses. So these kinds of teachings to me are very, very precious. So the more I do these things, if I can do it regularly, every day, practice all these things, I feel like it's creating much more space in the mind, to stabilize the mind, to be more open, to be more connected. Obviously, it doesn't work all the time, but I feel like for me, these kinds of practices work very well. And obviously there's more we could say, but that to me, these are like dear to my heart. Yeah, I guess it's bearing fruits. It doesn't mean that it's completely not at all, but it is bearing fruits. And I see, when I observe my mind, I see how it's changing. It's far from being perfect. There's still so many things to go, but I see the changes. So these practices, they work.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's
when see our group and see the monks and nun group in the academy, when you see, wow, you heard everyone should be surprised by that number. The one temple, of course, they keep conservative on reporting the real number, like 5,000 or no, like 10,000 monks and nuns in one temple. That's the reason is people feel the progress, right? I think maybe, you know, the renunciated ones feels more progress, right? Maybe they have seen some real truth, real realization part even. That's why it's just people keep staying there, they're attracted there. Yeah, the thing is, information is, or the message is, it's noticeable. You can see your progress. Okay.
Practice is extremely important. One thing that I'm doing personally is writing over and over and contemplating. I will never become anxious or irritated, and putting that into practice. You know, as they say, education and information is just that. Until it's practiced, then it becomes wisdom. And you know, all these things that I'm learning and reading they're just words unless I put them into practice. And then it becomes wisdom, and then it's something that I can internalize and to avoid a lot of the suffering. And one thing that I wanted to share was when we were talking about the buttons, Oliver mentioned a button. Another word for button would be trigger. You know, this is something I learned a long time ago. You can feel physically how you're being triggered before you act, before you react. And so one thing we need to do is we need to undo the roots of the cause of the suffering circumstance. And that's all quite personal. Myself, the cause of my personal suffering has to do with, let's say somebody says something to me, you know, contrary to my values, for instance. I feel self-pity, self-entitlement. I feel no compassion or empathy to the other person. You know, and you know, it's all overridden by the desires of self, my selfishness. You know, I feel threatened, so I feel that I need to be on the defense. So one thing I need to do is meditation really makes a huge difference, and contemplating on self-reflection, and also transferring your thoughts to empathy and compassion to the other person. It's difficult to do when you're in that situation. So it's good to remove yourself, go someplace where you can sit quietly and contemplate you know, the situation. But the most important thing to do, and I'm talking about an interaction with another person, is you have to let them know. You know, I'm leaving, I'll be back in 10 minutes, be back in a half hour. You know, if you don't do that, then the other person feels threatened. The other person feels like you don't care. You just left, right? You know, you must state that. You must say, hey, you know, I need to contemplate on this. And for me personally, I think the result is it gives me an opportunity to empathize and see where the other person is coming from. You know, see their side of the story. And, you know, I'm very fortunate of the fact that my wife is a devout Buddhist, and she's been practicing, you know, devoutly for the last 5 years, and she can do the same thing. And so we can come at each other later and say, wow, you know, I really understand you now, you know, and you feel compassion and empathy for the other person. You know, that takes a lot of practice. But the most important thing is, like I said earlier, is when you get that trigger. You know, I personally, if I don't remove myself, if I don't get in a state of, you know, contemplation and self-awareness, then if I fool myself that I can handle it, that's what I'm doing, is fooling myself. You know, when you're in the heat of the moment, regardless of what it is and who you're having, you know, where that suffering is coming from, if I think personally that I can handle it with my resources at the time, it's not going to happen. Right. And so, again, this comes with practice. It's a matter of actually recognizing when you're being triggered and saying, okay, now it's time to, you know, to put into practice what I'm learning. Right. So anyways, I thought I would share that with you.
this accumulative merit, may I obtain all seeing omniscience, and may all faults be defeated. The whirling turbulence wave of birth, aging, sickness, and death. From this ocean of samsara, may I liberate beings, just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience and the Samatambhadra too. All these merits now I dedicate to train and follow in their footsteps. As all the victorious Buddha of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme. So now I dedicate all these roots of virtue for all beings to perfect good actions. Uma Hom Vadaguru Pama Sede Hom. Uma Hom Vadaguru Pama Sede Hom. Uma Hom Vadaguru Pama Sede Hom. Thank you.
Thank you.